Well, thank you everyone for coming back on week 2. I'm so glad I didn't scare you away in week 1. Thank you for coming. This week, we are finishing our background of the historical study on the book of Daniel. And so we'll talk a lot about Babylon tonight. And we have one key phrase that we're going to tackle. But first, let's do a quick icebreaker and have some fun with this. I want each of you to tell me your favorite quarantine memory. So I'll go first. I watched Ryan, my husband, teach Finn, my 8-year-old, how to ride a bicycle. And he's put it off for about 4 years. He's 8 now. He watched all the neighborhood kids go. He just wasn't ready until pandemic. Okay. Want to have volunteers jump in? Should I randomly call people?
I'll go.
Okay, thank you, volunteers.
I'm kind of with you. Jack learned how to ride his bicycle during the quarantine, and he rides it every single day now, almost.
Oh, fantastic. New freedom.
Okay, I'll tell mine.
Okay.
We taught our kids how to play spades, and so we did that for a lot of nights, just kept it running. I think I was partners with Hayes and Drew with Mercer, and we just played it, and it was fun to teach them, and they caught on fast, and so that was neat.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Card games are fun.
I'll go next.
Thank you, Ann.
I got to be the teacher for my 6-year-old granddaughter here in Amarillo, and I turned out being the principal rather than
Oh dear.
Mhm.
That's a pretty good memory. Oh my. Thanks for sharing. Who's next?
I'll go next.
Okay.
I sold my house and moved into a new house.
Ooh, that's a lot during a pandemic. All right. Well, I hope you're all settled in.
Oh yes, definitely. It's very nice.
You got your Texas flag in the background.
Yes, I had to have a little bit of Texas with me wherever I go.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Betty. Who's next?
Samantha,
Yeah, Barbara.
may I make a suggestion?
Yes, please.
If everyone could say their name first, so I can scroll across my iPad and see who's talking, then I can match up faces with names.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because
So
I've only got
whoever-
4 on a screen here.
Oh, yeah, because it's a smaller area. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm trying to
All
get my laptop to work, but I haven't gotten that coordinated yet.
Okay. No, that's a good suggestion. Thanks.
So my name's Barbara Quadlander. My favorite one is that my sister from Hutchinson also was quarantined, but she would come over when things were lifted a little more, and we got to spend a lot more time together, and we actually rode bicycles around Great Plains Nature Center and just had a great time getting to hang out with her more because she's usually so busy.
That's great. More quality time. And Great Plains is a beautiful park. We love that.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks, Barbara.
Norma Manning.
Mhm.
We spent a week at my daughter's in later part of the quarantine and helped her redo her kitchen. We worked hard, but it was really fun to be with them for a solid week and accomplish a big deal.
Nice. I bet it looks great too.
It really does.
Thanks,
It
Norma.
has an old farmhouse, and we painted cabinet doors and walls and new hardware, new countertops. I mean, just really redid the whole thing, and it looks totally different. It's
That's
beautiful.
great. That's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. Yes, please go ahead.
Jane Peters. Of course, Jack and Evelyn, our grandchildren, they live with us along with Jennifer. And so during the pandemic, we've been trying to do more things outdoors. We've taken them to Cowtown, and Evelyn has a little electric car, and she never could drive it before. So now she's driving her little electric car all up and down the street,
Oh.
running into Jack and his bicycle, and she thinks that's just really funny. So
Now, how old is Evelyn? I can't remember.
she's 5.
She's 5. Okay.
She's 5. Jack's 7. So we're trying to do more stuff outdoors with them and
Mhm.
doing those things.
Fantastic. It sounds like fun. Thanks, Jane. All right, next.
I'll go. I'm Allison, and we kind of were going with the more outdoorsy thing too. And so, me being the not outdoorsy person that I am, we bought a massive tent. And I was thinking this will be plenty of room for all of us. Well, it's only been put up in our house because I refuse to go outside with the bugs.
Oh.
So the kids have loved it. They don't know any different yet. And so we have used the tent in the house a handful of times. It's been great.
Fantastic. And they won't know for a while either. You
That's
have little
right.
ones.
That's right.
You've got it made.
Well, just don't tell them about the campfire.
That's right. I know. Then they'll want s'mores, and we can't do that in the house. So
Oh, you can do that in the house. You just do it over the burner.
Right.
Domestic s'mores.
Right.
that's right. Yes.
I'm Beth. I've got a great group of neighbors, and we kind of get outside and socially distance a bit. But a couple Saturdays ago, one of my neighbors and I, we decided to have the first annual Virgil Street Pesto Fest. And we went up and down the street. We stripped everybody's basil plants, and we made multiple batches of pesto and shared it with everybody.
Oh, wow.
That is delicious.
That was kinda
Wow, I want to be on your street.
It's good food.
That's really good. Fantastic. That's really creative. Get your whole neighborhood in on it. Awesome. Thanks, Beth. Who's next? Wants to introduce themselves. Answer, what was your favorite pandemic memory? Let's see, who's not gone yet? Peggy, would you like to go? Can I put you on the spot, Peggy? No?
I don't really have one. I've been walking with my friend just almost every day. So that's been good.
Well, that sounds nice and relaxing. April, we haven't heard from you yet, have we?
No, my name is April. I don't really have a specific memory necessarily, but I have really tried to eat up, no pun intended, but eat up the slow down and the ability to have dinners together every night. Because the kids weren't in sports and there wasn't youth group activities to be running to. And so we, for almost 6 months, we had dinner at the table every single night. And so that was pretty awesome.
Yes.
Oh, family time is the best. Awesome. Thanks, April. Debbie, have we heard from you?
No, not yet. I should have followed Norma because the facilities are shut down and so much of my personal time wasn't eaten up. I got to spend 5 uninterrupted weeks in Atlanta and painted most of Jacob's house while I was there inside.
Aww.
So it was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work. Uninterrupted granddaughter time was great.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Debbie. Who are we missing?
Missy.
Oh, yes, of course. Your turn, Missy.
Cindy.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We took 2 of the grandkids to Frontier City in Oklahoma City. I don't know what we were thinking because you had to wear masks even when you rode the rides. But we had a really good time. They had never been to an amusement park before. They're 5 and 7, and we just had a blast. It wasn't too hot. We did wear masks the whole time, but it was still a blast. We made a lot of really good memories. So That's a fun part of the quarantine.
That sounds fun. I've never been there, so I've always driven past it on the way to other things.
Right. Yeah.
Never been there.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Nancy, have we heard from you yet? What was your favorite pandemic memory?
Well, we got a new dog.
Oh, what kind?
Lab, so he's 2.5 years old, so just trying to get used to him. So, and had some fun times with the grandkids. So.
All right. Thanks, Nancy. Our neighbors did the same thing. They got a brand new puppy. So it's a good time to do that. Carrie or Cindy, if you guys want to jump in and say hello, you're welcome to. If you're not comfortable with that, that's okay too. I'll give you a minute in case you want to unmute and jump in.
Okay. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are, Miss Cindy. We hear you.
All right. We did an extraordinary thing. We met in a neutral location, both of my sons and their families. Both of their sons graduated from high school this year. And so we were able to spend 3 days and nights in a neutral location, enjoying the out of doors in a lovely sports arena, and just celebrate the boys and be family. And it would never have happened except for COVID.
Wow, that's fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you, Cindy. Carrie, Carrie, do you want to share?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Is my microphone on? Okay. It's my first live camera Zoom, so I didn't know how I was
I'm glad it's with us.
One of my big gain, I guess, during the pandemic was I got back on Facebook. I had been off it for years and loved it, frankly. But I got back on just kind of so I could connect. But what I discovered was all of a sudden there was this influx of all these incredible sermons and preachers that I don't get to hear, like from my home congregation, my cousin who preaches in Arkansas, and so I started collecting sermons. And so every Sunday I just do a sermon burst on my Facebook page, but I get to start every day with almost a lesson, just and I didn't do that before, and so I loved that quiet time to get to do that and get to hear from people that I hadn't heard from in a long time, and just kind of wow, it was a great connector in a time that you were feeling real disconnected. So that was neat.
And we've enjoyed those. I think all of us who are friends with you on Facebook have seen.
Yeah, sorry.
5 different sermons every Sunday. It's great.
I know it's there.
Keep doing what you're doing. Okay. Talia, have we heard from you yet?
No, but I don't know that I have any favorite memories. Because I'm always here at home by myself, and I don't work. I'm disabled. Kimberly knows what my situation is. A few of you know what my situation is. I'm down in the back, so I don't get to go very many places. So I'm a homebody anyway, so it wasn't very different for me.
Okay, all right. Just another day. All right, thanks, Talia. I think we got everybody. Did I miss anyone? Okay. Kathy. Good heavens. Sorry about that.
Well, the first couple of months, of course, we were really confined to home. And then we discovered this thing called Zoom. And so we got on every Sunday afternoon and talked to our kids because they're all scattered everywhere. And so we have this new tradition of Zooming on Sunday afternoon.
Oh, that's so nice. So you get everybody back together. That's great. So there's been some positives. That's good to hear. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being willing to share your favorite pandemic memory. Now, I have another poll for you as we get into what we're going to chat about tonight. let me launch this new poll here. I'm curious what you know about the city of Babylon, the ancient city, or the metaphorical city. Where do you think it's found in the Bible? So here's a poll that should have just popped up on your screen, and I'll actually take a screen capture of the poll. You can answer as many times as you want. You're not limited to one selection. So start telling me, just start making choices. Where do we read about Babylon in the Bible? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. I will share the results with you. Are you able to see the results? All right, what do you think? So most people said 2 Kings. Yes, that is absolutely true. That's where the Chronicle of the Exile is. Jeremiah, absolutely. But you might be surprised to find out this is a trick question because Babylon is mentioned in every one of those books of the Bible. And there are actually more than that. It's just that Zoom only lets me put in 10 options. So I had to stop at 10, but there's more. So Babylon is mentioned in many books of our Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, especially. So that is what our activity will be tonight. Let me take these results off of the screen. So if you are willing and able to open up your web browser, your internet browser, I'm going to have you go to BibleGateway.com. And what I'll do is I'll put the link to the website in the chat if that will be helpful to anyone. So if you've never been to this website before, you can come to our Zoom chat. Maybe it's thinking. There it goes. And I just posted the link, the shortcut link to Bible Gateway. Ooh. All right, so once you are at Bible Gateway, I'm going to post a series of scriptures, and if you will be gracious enough to volunteer to read them to us, that way you don't just have to listen to me read all of them. We'll share the load. So let's divide up our scriptures right now. And so I'll put the first one here in chat. Who would be willing to read Ezekiel chapter 30, verse 3? Someone take that. And
I'll read it.
Oh, thank you so much. Here is the next scripture. It's in Isaiah chapter 13. So someone volunteer for that for me.
I'll take Isaiah.
Thank you so much. Okay. Boy, we're getting into all the Old Testament prophets here. Here comes Habakkuk. I have to be honest, I'd never really read much about Habakkuk ever until this. But this is good. Okay, somebody grab Habakkuk.
I've got Habakkuk.
Thank you, Kim. All right, last one coming your way is from the book of Amos, Amos the shepherd. Okay, now before we read those, oh, who has Amos? Anybody want to volunteer? Nope, I'm going to give it to Beth. I saw Beth's hand go up first. Nancy and Missy, you're next. I'll find something more for you to do too. So you saw how many books of the Bible were listed in that. That was 10, but there's even more. So I wanted to illustrate that Babylon is at the beginning of the Old Testament, right? It starts in Genesis chapter 11. It's part of Nimrod's area. And you have the Tower of Babel, you know, which some scholars are not sure if it was in the city of Babylon or the next city over, but regardless, they had a ziggurat tower, which is where, which is a picture that we get, a multi-stepped tower that was all through the Mesopotamian cultures. The ziggurat is how they connected to their gods. And so we see that in the book of Genesis. We see the people building a tower. And we'll come back to that in a minute, the tower part. But you see, that's at the very beginning of Israel's story. Right off the bat in the book of Genesis, we see Babylon. And so then moving through the Old Testament story, Babylon's always there, kind of in the background. They are at varying levels of political strength, but they're always still kind of there. And then we get to the book of Daniel towards the end of Israel's story. And that's where we are in this study, is in the book of Daniel. But Babylon continues on as an actual lived-in city, geographically speaking, for quite a while. It makes it through the Greek period and through the Roman period, and it lays in ruins today, but we hear it mentioned as a metaphor all through the book of Revelation. And I was really hoping that Brenda Heller would be here tonight, because she just taught that great class on the book of the Revelation. And we see Babylon there, but it's not the city itself, not the ancient city. It's now a metaphor for, or an archetype, if you like the literary term better. It's an archetype for evil, for cities and nations and empires who do evil. So Babylon is all through the entire Bible, the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament as well. And so if you go to Bible Gateway, I know some of you who are volunteering to read those. If you go to Bible Gateway on your internet browser and you go to their search bar and you type in Babylon, this is kind of how I got the poll. If you just type in Babylon, you can do that right now. Follow along with me. How many results do you get? Is anybody doing that right now? If you just type Babylon in the search, how many results?
315.
Yes. I'm in the New International Reader's version. It says 432. So depending on the translation, you know, we'll get a few extra here and there. That's a lot of mentions in the Bible. And it all goes back to the story of God's people, right? God at the very, especially the very beginning of the Mosaic Law, you know, gives the laws to Moses and says, if you follow me, things will go well. But we get to Deuteronomy 28 and the warning is issued, if you don't follow me, I will send people in to take you captive. And we see that repeated throughout the Old Testament. And then we get the prophets. And so that's what we're going to read now, is what were the prophets' take on this, right? Because they were supposed to deliver messages from God to the people about, you know, turn away from your wicked ways, remember to follow God and things will go well. You know, but when we get to Jesus' time, we read that the Jewish people back in the Old Testament, they killed the prophets. They didn't want to hear what they were doing wrong. So that's what we're going to dig into today, is how does God view evil, and how does this play a part in the book of Daniel when you have this empire that represents everything that's evil in the world? So let's have the first volunteer please read Ezekiel 30 verse 3. Who's got that one?
I do. For the day is near, even the day of the Lord is near. It will be a day of clouds, a time of doom for the nations.
That's a bummer. That sounds pretty down. The phrase, the day of the Lord, is what we're going to look at. And so Debbie just read that in Ezekiel. The day of the Lord is kind of like, you know, last week when we talked about the word apocalypse, it has baggage. People already have a certain idea in mind of what apocalypse is, but then we read the biblical definition and it's completely different. The same is true with day of the Lord. There's small d, day of the Lord, and there's capital D, day of the Lord, right? So, you know, from our understanding of the Bible, there's one big day of the Lord when Jesus comes back, right? And God makes all things right and, you know, restores his kingdom. Well, so in the meantime, we have lots of little d days of the Lord. And so let's look at Isaiah. And actually, when we get to Ezekiel 30, I only had you read verse 3. But if you look at the context of it, this describes a little d, day of the Lord, when God used Babylon. This is before the exile. God used Babylon to go take over Egypt. Because you think back to the Exodus. Egypt was kind of like a Babylon, maybe on steroids, right? They kind of represented everything that was evil because they oppressed God's people and they forced them into labor to build cities. And the people cried out to God, you know, please come save us. And so he sent Moses to liberate them. That's the pattern that's being repeated with this day of the Lord. Something huge happens and God will come and take care of the evil and then free his people. And so that's what we see with this exile too. So Ezekiel's a good example of that. Who's got Isaiah?
I do.
Awesome.
Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. See, the day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land desolate and destroy the sinners within it. The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. I will punish the world for its evil, the wicked for their sins.
Thank you. Did yours say Babylon in there? Or no? It just talked about the city it's destroying.
It just talked about it's destroying. It didn't say anything about Babylon.
Okay. So in Isaiah chapter 13, when we read more of the context around it, and even Isaiah chapter 14 as well, this is specifically referring, and he says it in the text later, it's specifically referring to Babylon in 539 BC, when Babylon is overthrown by the next empire, the Media. And so that will actually be a part of our Daniel story. We're not quite there yet. But in Isaiah, this day of the Lord, the little d day of the Lord, it does kind of sound like the English version of apocalypse. Like things are being destroyed, it's cataclysmic, the stars and the moon and the darkness. And so when we read day of the Lord throughout the Bible, even though it can sound like it's what we think of as apocalypse, it's not the end times. It is just a very horrible situation, but it is not the end because we're still here. You see what I mean? So interestingly, Jesus, when he's talking about the coming fall of Jerusalem in Matthew, he's talking about the day when Jerusalem will fall. It happened in AD 70. The Romans came and conquered Jerusalem. But when Jesus was like foreshadowing that, when he was predicting that, he used Isaiah 13. He used that same language because when God uses other nations to come and deliver judgment, it's epic, it's awesome, it is scary, and it might feel like the end of the world, but it's not. It's little d, day of the Lord. Okay, another thing that illustrates this is in Habakkuk. Who's got that?
I have it here. So
awesome.
Habakkuk 1-4.
Yes.
And the oracle that Habakkuk the prophet saw. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity, and why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise. So the law is paralyzed, and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. And then 5 through 11?
Yes.
Look among the nations and see, wonder and be astounded, for I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if I told you. For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, who march through the breadth of the earth to seize dwellings not their own. They are dreaded and fearsome. Their justice and dignity go forth from themselves. Their horses are swifter than leopards, more fierce than the evening wolves. Their horsemen press proudly on. Their horsemen come from afar. They fly like an eagle, swift to devour. They all come for violence, all of their faces forward. They gather captives like sand. At kings they scoff, and at rulers they laugh, and they laugh at every fortress, for they pile up earth and take it. Then they sweep by like the wind and go on, guilty men whose own might is their God.
So that's describing the Chaldeans, which is a city-state term for Babylon, the Babylonians. Remember, Abraham was from Ur, which was in the Chaldeans. It's just describing an area. So Habakkuk is asking God in that first reading in verses 1 through 4, how long, O Lord? Does that sound like anybody we've heard quoted in America in the 1960s? Anybody? Martin Luther King Jr. quoted a lot from this and some other prophets as well, asking God, how long will you tolerate this kind of behavior from nations, this injustice where they trample the poor and there's no justice in the courts for the poor? And so this is the embodiment of Babylon. And the second section that Kim read it describes the arrogance of Babylon, how they take over other nations, they take their resources, they take what they want when they want it. They have no regard for the poor, even for the disabled, for anyone. And which is really ironic, because if you think about where Babylon started, like where they came from, one of their early kings was named Hammurabi, and he came up with the law that says an eye for an eye. So I guess that kind of tells you, because Jesus said, you've heard it said eye for an eye, but I tell you. But that's where that came from, the Babylonians, from Hammurabi. So they had a code of laws and ethics, but they let the need for power get to them, and they used it for evil, not for good. And so that's what Habakkuk is describing. So how does God handle evil and injustice? He brings the day, little d day of the Lord. Because as we see in the book of Daniel, even, I think in chapter 5, we see the end of Babylon. So God will allow it for a time before he brings his day of the Lord to come in and change the rise and fall of nations. So big picture, I've heard it said that God is the king of history, and all of this history is going toward a purpose. And so the Bible story shows it from beginning to end. And so God will only tolerate this injustice for a time before he will step in with his day. Okay, last one, Amos. Who's got Amos? Beth, is that you?
Yep, I've got Amos.
Okay.
They hate the one who rebukes in the gate, and they abhor the one who speaks uprightly. Therefore, because you tread down the poor and take grain taxes from him, though you have built houses of hewn stone, yet you shall not dwell in them. You have planted pleasant vineyards, but you shall not drink wine from them. For I know your manifold transgressions and your mighty sins, afflicting the just and taking bribes, diverting the poor from justice at the gate. Therefore the prudent keep silent at that time, for it is an evil time. Woe to you who desire the day of the Lord. For what good is the day of the Lord to you? It will be darkness and not light. It will be as though a man fled from a lion and met a bear. or as though he went into the house, leaned his hand on the wall, and a serpent bit him. Is not the day of the Lord darkness and not light? Is it not very dark with no brightness in it?
Thank you. That's hard to hear. When you hear that without reading it yourself or reading the context, you might assume that's talking about Babylon, but it's not. The context of that one, and you should go read this later, Amos was a shepherd from Judah in the southern kingdom, and God called him to go to the northern kingdom, Israel, to call them out for the injustices that they were doing to God's people. So now Israel, in this case, has become like Babylon, trampling on the poor, injustice everywhere, following false gods. And so, whereas before, like think back to the Exodus and other times, people cried out for God to bring justice, bring the day of the Lord so we can be freed from this oppression and evil. Well, now, Amos is saying, woe to you who want the day of the Lord, because in the past it might have been good for you if you were the one oppressed, but now Israel is the one oppressing. And they are behaving like a Babylon. And so the day of the Lord is coming, but it's not going to be on their side. And that is where the book of Daniel starts. That's the exile. That's the whole reason why the Israelites were put into exile. Because God says, care for the poor, care for the foreigners, care for those less fortunate, the marginalized, and they were doing everything but that. They were probably charging interest too, which also was against the law of Moses. And so this is the real downfall of Israel. Well, God's people, Israel and Judah both, were taken into captivity. That was the day of the Lord for them, was being taken into exile. So ouch, that is not good. Israel became a Babylon. So to kind of put this in a nice pretty package, to really understand the book of Daniel, you've got to understand the day of the Lord, and not the like Left Behind series, the book series Left Behind. It's not that kind of a day of the Lord. It's not the end times. It's specific events throughout history where God intervenes in nations to remove evil nations and lift up better ones, or vice versa. And he'll do it on his own people too, should they choose, like Deuteronomy 28, to stop following his rules. Okay. Now there's confusion about the day of the Lord, and I made a distinction between little d and big D because there are TV preachers today who have a whole theology built around like the end times. So like the Left Behind book series is part of that. It's called dispensationalism. And, to a point, it's good. It has to do with the end times, and we call it eschatology. So, you think about of all of the different time periods in the Bible, you've got the patriarchs, right? You've got Moses and the law of Moses, the Mosaic law. You've got the Christian era or dispensation. But the whole day of the Lord has been put in a different context in this end times theology, and it has to do with, in the book of the Revelation, it is the 1,000-year reign. And so there are Christians who prescribe to this. They believe in this, that God will rapture up all of the Christians, and then that will usher in this 1,000-year reign on earth, and that will be a time for the Jews as a people, the nation of Israel, to repent and they'll have a second chance to follow Jesus as their Messiah. And it goes into much more depth than that. That is the 10-second version. But what they do is they take this day of the Lord and they turn it into, it's all about the end times. And it's even influenced American foreign policy towards Israel. So it has quite a following. But at least in the churches of Christ, we are what we call amillennial. So we view the book of the Revelation as history. This prophecy has already taken place. It was given to a certain people at a certain time, and it's been carried out. It still has value for us today. We learn from it. We understand the whole story of God's love for us through all of that. But if you watch certain TV preachers, you'll get a very different image of what the day of the Lord is. So I wanted to put this in context for you as we really get into the book of Daniel. Starting next week, we'll start chapter 1. So that with the word, apocalypse and the word day of the Lord, it will really help us to put Daniel in its proper historical context. So it's not about the end times. It's not about when Jesus returns. It's about an actual historical set of events that have happened and taken place. And so I just really wanted to make sure we're all on the same page with that as we go forward, because that is how a lot of misunderstandings about the book of Daniel happen, is people have one idea of apocalypse and the day of the Lord, and they run with it rather than using the biblical definition. So I hope that helps put it in context. What questions do you have about the day of the Lord, Daniel, how this all fits in? Did that make sense? I see nodding. Okay. This is kind of deep, kind of downer stuff. So as much as we want Jesus to return, just that scripture from Amos really gets me. It's like, woe to you who want the day of the Lord, because you better be ready. And if you're not in the right, you're going to feel the effects too. So in Daniel chapter 1, a preview of next week, part of the reason Babylon has this reputation is because they try to make themselves into a god. And we'll see that in chapter 1. And well, we'll see it in chapter 2, actually, where there's a big statue, right? And at some point, people have to worship the statue later on. You've got the fiery furnace story later on. So they try to elevate themselves as deity, as a god. And God doesn't like that, obviously. So he will come back, and there will be a day of the Lord, or there was a day of the Lord for Babylon, the ancient city, in 539 BC. They experienced their own day of the Lord when the Medes came. So we're going to see this play out in multiple chapters in the book of Daniel. So chapter 1 is next week. I'll send out an email after, well, probably not tonight. I'll send an email tomorrow, because right now I'm editing a video that you can watch first. I'll give a quick intro to chapter 1 and some of the historical, cultural, geography type stuff that I think is pretty cool. And so you'll watch that, you read the chapter, and then we'll be ready for next Tuesday. Okay, now we've got 8 minutes for you to go into a breakout room. And if you were able to watch the video of the Tower of Babel, raise your hands. Were you able to watch that video? Okay, or read a little bit about Babylon. Awesome. I want you to tell me something that surprised you about that. And then we'll come back in the last 2 minutes and we'll discuss. So one scribe from every room, write down the things that surprised you and your group mates about that video. And be sure and say a quick prayer before you come back. So somebody set your timer for 8 minutes. Someone be a scribe. And let's All right, oops, hold on. Okay, 4 to 5, here we go. On your mark, get set, go. Okay, while we're waiting on them to come back, would you have your scribe from each room tell me what surprised you guys about that video? Who wants to go first?
Oh, I will. Are you ready?
Yeah, please do.
Well, it surprised us that it was, next to the temple. We all have that Bible school flannel graph idea in our head where it was just a spiral out in the middle of nowhere doing something they'd never done before. So not so big, not next to the temple, not what it was for. And we also talked a lot about what it was like to have God confuse your languages and the pandemonium. Deb had a good analogy of being in a foreign airport and trying to read signs and talk to people. And
ooh, yeah, that would be rough.
The pandemonium that must have ensued with all that.
Yeah. Oops. Here, I will mute everyone so we don't get some feedback here. Barbara, thank you so much for that. Did you want to add anything, or was that pretty much it? Okay. All right, let's hear from another scribe.
I was a scribe for my group. And because I didn't watch the video. And so some of the things that we discussed was how, that surprised us was how the idea of the Tower of Babel was actually God wanting, or men wanting to reach out to God. And God said, no, I reach out to you. I don't need your help. I don't need your, because the men would worship their gods. And well, I don't know, ladies, what was the word we were using? Where they would help their gods so that their gods would help them. And God said, no, I'll reach out to you through Abraham. And you can't reach me and by building the tower.
Wasn't that something?
We
had
also
the wrong
talked
direction.
about, right.
Yeah.
We also talked about, which I thought was real interesting to me, not even watching the video, was, that this being prepared to meet your God. And how even in the book of Amos, countries were having great prosperity under ungodly leaders, and how even now, how to relate that to what we're going through now, and what we pray for our country, and how it is very, very parallel to what's happening.
It is. Absolutely. All right, Missy, thank you so much. Thank you, group. All right, one or two more scribes left. Who's next?
I was scribe again for our group. We wanted to again thank you for the meat that we are getting from you, because we really feel like we're getting into some good meat of the stories, and we're very appreciative of that. We talked about the difference in geographically speaking, where things were located, and how different that was for us to learn. We talked about how the people were trying to reach up when that wasn't really what they should have been doing, that God comes to us. We talked about the fact that he stated that the Bible is written for us, but not necessarily to us. And so, there again, we have to do what you are helping us do, and put context in with the story. You have to know what those people were doing and how they were living, and what it was like back then, to know the context of the story. And the last thing we talked about was towards the end, he talked about the sacred place, how, that started out in the Garden of Eden. That was God's sacred place with us, and how we broke that. And then he talked about the Holy Spirit, and then eventually we'll have a sacred place again with God. So those were some of the things that we got out of the video.
I learned a lot from that video, so I'm glad you guys have enjoyed it too. One more scribe. Thank you so much, April. And do you want to add anything to that? Who is our last scribe?
Okay, I think that's my group.
Okay.
We talked about what was really cool was the ziggurats, and maybe even kind of made the comparison to the pyramids. There was always that desire to look upward, whether it be the true God or another God. And in these polytheistic times, we talked about how it was, not necessarily an homage always to our God, but there was that yearning to have that sacred space, that relational or attempt to be postured with their God or our God. One thing we did talk about was maybe the cyclical idea of, okay, we're going to give God this, and we're going to provide God with this, and we're going to offer this so that we'll get something in return. And so it was kind of on man's terms, whether it was man deciding what God needed from me today, or what had been told to him to provide for God, so that we get some good stuff in return. We talked a little bit about how, just kind of the replication of this stairway, this reaching out to heaven, Jacob's ladder even, and there was always that posturing to want to be closer to God. So
absolutely,
it was a good lesson.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie, for sharing your team thoughts. All of those are fabulous takeaways from that video. And so I know we talked about the Tower of Babel, Genesis chapter 10, 11, with the founding of Babylon in Nimrod's area, and then you've got the ziggurat here. It all plays a part in the book of Daniel. And so you're going to see, even when King Cyrus sends the exiles back, part of the reason he pays for all of that is because he doesn't want to anger the gods. He wants good vibes, good things to happen to his kingdom in return for sending the exiles back with extra money to rebuild their temple. So, man, it's all connected. I'm so glad that all of you are here tonight. I'll hang around for a little bit if you have questions that you want to ask, maybe outside of the recording. And so next week, just read chapter 1. I'll have a short video for you that outlines some pretty cool stuff. Next week, with a show of hands or thumbs up, I guess, do you want more time in breakout rooms? Less of me talking and more breakout rooms? No? Okay, is the amount of time in breakout rooms okay? Okay, very good. All right, you guys are easy to please. Thanks. Okay, we are all done for tonight. Thank you so much for coming. Next week's Daniel chapter 1. Bye, guys.